Today we're going to talk about rep ranges and growing muscle. Whenever we make these videos, I always try my hardest to make sure that we address questions that we got while we were in the gym or talk about topics that we talked about while we were here. And so this is a question that we got last week and something we talked about. It's been conventionally known that you will use lower to moderate rep ranges if you want to build bulk, and then use higher rep ranges if you want to tone. And so there's a little bit to unpack here. Let's start with bulking and toning. Bulking, putting on a lot of muscle, obviously is a little bit different than toning. When we bulk and we're looking to build muscle, we're probably looking to build muscle as much and as quickly as possible. Toning, what that generally is going to mean is we're probably looking to maintain the muscle we have, maybe lose a little bit of body fat to improve the appearance of the muscle or the region. But in both cases, we want to train effectively the same way. And this is why. When we're looking to build muscle, one of the things that impacts muscle growth the most is, of course, how much we're eating. So if you're looking to build muscle, you're probably eating a little more than you need so you can continue to build tissue. When we're toning, in a lot of cases, people are going to be at maintenance or lower, so they might be even losing a little bit of body fat. And when we lose weight, any amount of weight, we're inevitably going to take some muscle with us. And so it's really important that we continue to strength train as if we were trying to build it, because we want to ignite the anabolic processes that will continue to rebuild that muscle and help us maintain it while we're losing body fat. And that's why strength training for toning is so important. It's not just for building muscle bigger. It has a lot to do with your overall goal. And the strength training is a very important component of improving the look and appearance of certain areas in your body. So that all being said, what we've outlined here is we need to strength train. So when it comes to building muscle, or in the case of toning, when it comes to maintaining muscle, what is the best rep range to use, and does it really matter? Real quick, there are three basic things you need to know about growing muscle. The first one is muscle growth requires mechanical tension. And all that means is tension, pressure on the muscle itself. And for most people, that's going to mean how much load are we using. We aren't going to talk so much right now about exercises, so we're not going to talk about length, tension relationships, and choosing exercises. We're just going to talk about rep ranges. So that's probably a whole separate video, choosing different exercises if you're looking to grow muscle versus, maybe be a little more sport specific. So that's a different video. But for today, the first thing to know is about tension. We need load on a muscle to make it grow. The second thing is that we need to create some metabolic stress. What this means is we need to demand that muscle create energy, because energy creates metabolic stress. As we create the energy in the muscle, it leaves things like waste products in the muscle, and this metabolic stress contributes to hypertrophy. The third one is muscle damage. This is another one that's important, mostly because the inflammatory process that comes along with muscle damage encourages the regeneration of muscle cells and the growth of muscle cells. And so knowing all three of these things, instead of looking at rep ranges and saying which ones are for which, let's just say, for all intents and purposes, you can grow muscle pretty effectively between 4 to 5 reps all the way up through 20 or 30 reps. And in fact, if you can get all three of those bases covered, tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage, you can grow in basically any rep range. But for simplicity, I think the best way to attack this is to explain why certain rep ranges don't work as well for muscle growth. And then I'll give you my opinion quickly on why certain rep ranges might work better for certain muscles or muscle groups. The first range that doesn't work that well for muscle growth is probably like the 1 to 4, 1 to 5 range. The problem with the 1 to 4, 1 to 5 range is the really, really low reps. First off, they're very neurologically driven. While we require a lot of energy very quickly, it doesn't put a lot of stress on the system from a metabolic standpoint. The second thing is that since we're not doing very many reps overall, or it would require a lot of sets to get a lot of reps in, it also doesn't create that much muscle damage. So while the tension is extremely high, we don't get enough volume in very easily to fill the other two buckets. And so what you'll see a lot is if you're watching maybe your favorite lifters, gym people, power lifters perhaps, on a social media site, you're gonna see a lot of these 1 to 4 rep ranges. And these people are very strong and they have a lot of muscle. And what you probably don't see is you don't see all of the extra accessory work that happens later in the workout. It's not as sexy to post online, so it doesn't get videoed a lot, but you can rest assured that most good lifters are probably spending about 80% of their time in more moderate rep ranges, working to build the muscles that are required to do those really heavy lifts that you see. The next rep range that doesn't seem to quite work as well for muscle growth is anything beyond like that 20 or 30 rep range. And the reason is this. First off, there's not very much tension coming through the muscle. The lighter the weight gets, the less tension effectively we're getting on the muscle. What this amounts to is when we have less load, especially as a percentage of what we're actually capable of, we don't require as much energy to move that weight. So if you can squat with a 100-pound dumbbell in your hands, doing bodyweight squats is not probably going to be a very effective means of driving hypertrophy, because your bodyweight squats are going to be too light for your current capability. Not only that, but when the load is really, really light, it's very likely that you're not going to be creating as much muscle damage, and you'll need to do a lot more in terms of volume, reps and sets, in order to create all that muscle damage, because the load is just effectively too light. So these really, really high rep sets don't work as well. And one of the most important things with high rep sets too is that when we're talking maybe 20 or 30 reps, we're probably more often going to be taking these sets closer to failure, because it's very, very easy to underestimate ourselves and use weights that are too light if we're doing sets of 20 or 30. It's a little bit more difficult to do that if you're doing a set of 8. And what I mean by that is if you are doing a set of 8 and you grab something that's a little bit too light, it's probably still heavy enough to elicit a response. But if you grab something for 30 that's too light, it may just be too light in general. So the really low reps and the really high reps don't fill those buckets really well. And what does that leave us with? It leaves us with anything between maybe 4 to 5 reps all the way up through 20 or 30. We can build muscle at all of these rep ranges, provided we do enough volume with enough load to drive tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. And real quick, I think some rep ranges work better for certain exercises than others. In general, my general rule is that compound multi-joint exercises typically lend themselves to lower rep ranges, mostly because they're more technical, they're more technically advanced. And what happens is when we go through really, really high rep ranges, 15, 20 especially, 25, 30, what happens is a lot of times your form and technique will begin to break down, and we're no longer targeting exactly what we were targeting in the first place. So more compound multi-joint exercises seem to fit better in the lower end of that rep range, from that 4, 5, 6 range up through 10 or 15. And then the second thing that we find is that those higher rep ranges typically lend themselves better to the single joint exercises, curls, tricep extensions, leg extensions, some of this stuff where there's only one joint involved. One of the things is with the lower rep ranges, you need, or typically will use, so much load because you're capable of moving that weight only a few times, whether it's 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 or 10. There's so much load coming through the joints. It typically, for a lot of people, is going to be a lot more comfortable to use higher rep ranges with single joint exercises. And so that's basically rep ranges in a nutshell. If you're looking to bulk up, or you're looking to just maintain muscle while you tone or lose some weight, the approach is essentially the same. We're looking to drive tension and metabolic stress and muscle damage. And we do that by using a wide range of rep ranges, right? All the way 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 20 or 30. And we can choose them differently based on the exercise we're doing. And as long as we can fill those 3 buckets, then we can rest assured that we're doing what we need to do to create the stimulus we need to build muscle or at least maintain it.